Welcome to Dweller of the Dark. We are a channel honoring the yellowed and blackened bones of many prominent authors. We will be digging up several obscure, strange, and forgotten authors who influenced many of the great horror, science fiction, and fantasy writers to date. More tales of the horrifying, obscure, strange, and forgotten are climbing out of the tombs. Check out our links below for more information. Subscribe, comment, like, donate, or I'll send the Devil of Black Bayou to rip your head off, as we did the like button. Send us ghoulish delights for the Skull and Bones collection. Your pound of writer's flesh will feed our ghouls for now. Children of horror, legion of ghouls. Tonight, we dug up that real pain in the neck, Anton Valtaire, to let the blood fly for a special dedication. This comedic short story launched a novel that still hasn't satisfied the bloodthirst of the Devil of Black Bayou. This tale is dedicated to the man who inspired the devilish creation of Anton Valtaire. Valtaire is our horrific and comedic pirate vampire, born on red seas while we sailed from Scotland across the treacherous Atlantic on the vessel New Venture. Anton's vampiric muse is the master of the dark arts. He is the definitive Lord Byron of our times, and one hell of a guitar player with the Hollywood vampires. He is the flawed, the tortured, the talented, the kind, the fallible, the vindicated, and most certainly the great Johnny Depp. Brother in blood and flame, may your demons always drive you to greater success and keep you warm. To Johnny Depp, devilishly devoted to horror, may your soul always be. The Devil of Black Bayou, comedic short, by Jeffrey LeBlanc. Poem, Blood and Dust. The pirates slaughtered the captain's maid. Anton Valtaire became the devil's king, and her broken heart rotted holding the blade. A vampire's thirst is a deadly thing. He sailed for Lafitte's treasure, the golden stack. Anton Valtaire became the devil's king. No murdering man of his crew ever came back, and the wind and waves drifted somber and black. A vampire's thirst is a deadly thing. Centuries passed on the dark swamp land. Anton Valtaire became the devil's king, and strangers trekked haunted Black Bayou's sand. A vampire's thirst is a deadly thing. Curious hands desecrated the graves of the undead. Anton Valtaire became the devil's king, till they found the silver coffin to their dread. Fascination became terror when they opened the lid. Eyes fluorescent and fangs sanguine that box had hid. A vampire's thirst is a deadly thing. And a demon bat crawled from the dust inside. Anton Valtaire became the devil's king, and the strangers shrieked and screamed and pleaded as they died. A vampire's thirst is a deadly thing. 1. The music, especially that fiery jazz, the cries of laughter, and the smell of cloves and cayenne kicking up spicy foods, have kept the blood flowing in New Orleans for hundreds of years. For hundreds of years, the blood, the life, has flowed down the mighty Mississippi into the dark rues and alleys of the quarter, and on more than one occasion in the city that never sleeps, a fool or the foolhardy has perished. Tyler Poche noticed the usual Caitlin nervousness, the trembling of her lips, the gripping and releasing of both her hands, and the agitated tick in her brow that told him she was overwhelmed with doing something that was way too illegal or dangerous. But Tyler also knew he'd sway her for sure to follow him, even if it was to a haunted cemetery. He knew in his very bones Caitlin always hated fighting with him. She'd cave and tag along long before they had an argument or confrontation. Though this particular disagreement, breaking into one of the most haunted cemeteries in the world, was headed into newfound territory. This was the kind of bad trouble with Caitlin that even Tyler wasn't sure would end well. She followed Tyler. To her credit, Caitlin Dupre went right up to the cemetery walls before chickening out. Not that Tyler was surprised. He never thought he'd get Caitlin even to drive to the place, nor, in any scenario, get Caitlin Dupre to leave the safe confines of her car, head blindly into the fog-covered darkness, and follow him right up to the wall. But why would this guy be trying to break into a cemetery in the middle of the night? Was it to hold a seance? He had no candle or Ouija board, so not likely did he want to see a ghost. There were better places to break in. The Myrtles, for example, where he could see all manner of phantom. Was he grave robbing? Again, not likely, since he had no shovel or pickaxe to break into the tombs. Was it a treasure hunt? I guess, in a way you could say so. But this was a quite unusual treasure Tyler Poche was seeking. Caitlin, I know he's in there. All we do is climb over and get to the spot, and we get 5 levels. Tyler Poche was speaking to his petite and frightened girlfriend. He had moved haphazardly, struggling to climb over the high, decayed wall surrounding St. Louis Cemetery. The location, known officially as St. Louis Cemetery Number 3, was the most visited historical and haunted history spot in New Orleans. But Tyler was not here for a haunted history tour. The cemetery was now ground zero for a type of treasure hunt, Pokemon Go. Now, amongst the Voodoo Queen graves, ghosts, and possible Rougarous, was the latest virtual spot for the recent game app Phenomena, an application that identified virtual monsters and rewarded players with strength and increased player levels on a cell phone. The object of the game was for enthusiasts like Caitlin and Tyler to secure make-believe monsters only they could see on their devices. The application he purchased weeks ago compelled him addictively. The more he searched and won, the more he would move all over real geographical locations. At these locations, he'd find data spots that showed as strength level points or rewards once identified. Tyler Poche's obsession above all others with Pokemon Go was to capture the celebrated super strength character Valtrexo. He was newly created for the game, an orange, pink, and blue pigmented monstrosity, while highly colored, had been elusive to detect anywhere. Pieced together from antelope
turtle and porcupine shapes and appendages. It had a long neck, 12 legs, a turtle shell covered in crystal blue spines, great bursts of speed and defenses. Baltrexo Neasels was the quintessential strength character, guaranteed to move any player up 5 levels easily. All information and speculation on his location and strategy to capture Baltrexo came from gossip, gaming Bibles, and tech magazines. All that Tyler Pochier, the former bartender, pizza delivery guy, electrician, river rat, and jack of all trades knew was that he had to capture Baltrexo at all cost. Convincing, or rather dragging, his girlfriend Caitlin along was just lagniappe. Now, after 2 weeks of exhaustive day and night searches, Tyler's journey was coming to a successful end. Borrowing money from Caitlin and having her drive him all over, Tyler had gotten a tip from an unlikely source, a hobbled, ugly, half-blind blues man in Louis Armstrong Park. Finding the source, the blues man had been an experience in itself. What had drawn them to this strange guitar-playing soothsayer for the knowledge they so desperately sought? It was his guitar playing that caught the young couple's notice. Caitlin's ears especially caught fire for a moment, listening to those maniacal poetic chords. Her musical ears heard halfway across Louis Armstrong Park a crazy guitar rip of Robert Johnson's Hellhound on My Trail. Immediately curious, Caitlin obsessed in knowing the source of such wicked playing. As she approached with Tyler in tow, she took note of the deformed, half-blind man with astonishment. How to describe such a magician of musical chords and chorus, rhythm, and rhyme? The blues virtuoso had a hand-rolled cigarette hanging from his mouth. His eyes were large and white as cue balls, covered in fevered perspiration on his brow, neck, and cordwood forearms. He stretched and owned the guitar. As he wailed on, Caitlin observed the ancient man had calloused, skeletal fingers which seemed to reach and coax you into the darkness. Sparks seemed to arc and illuminate as a red thunderstorm, while the guitarist continued strumming the red and silver guitar like lightning. On he sang under the Louis Armstrong lights, flickering like a flame in the dark. Sometimes Caitlin and Tyler would later swear the blues man would have a weird shimmer and rhythmic viper sway that brought another spark or two. Sparks that again flamed the darkness and conjured a mysterious curiosity. On and on, the blues man lamented of the hellhound chasing him. Each chosen word practically a penance, pleading the listener to change their ways or suffer his fate. Each part of the chorus held the sincerest of sorrows. Tyler and Caitlin further observed other strange things about the blues man. He sat in what appeared to be more of a turquoise gilded throne than your standard street musician chair. No ebony black enamel painted chairs for this guy. Further, Caitlin noted the strange man's clothes, out of a bygone era for sure. Polished, ruby red, patent leather shoes, wool socks, and a black silk suit pressed and starched to the point the creases could cut like a razor blade. But the most peculiar item of the man's ensemble was by his left leg. The mysterious blues master had a small, aged cardboard sign. The sign seemed to balance with some magic trick as the man played on. At times, the sign seemed to sway and move as if it too were dancing to the chords. The more Tyler and Caitlin stared at it, the more it seemed the sign was an entity unto itself. That effect was weird, but the words beheld on the cardboard really gave a jolt of unease. At one point, the couple finally had a better view of the words as the sign leaned against the blues man's highly polished, ruby patent shoes. While his shoes tapped in a slowed rhythm, they read the full meaning of the sign. The words that struck the couple as a peculiar joke, a devilish pun, or was it? Here were the comedic words that brought a laugh, then just a blink of unease. All souls pay to play. The devil gets his dues in the end. So, you see, I play for souls, not money. Oh, how Caitlin and Tyler thought the night itself was alive with jazz and blues music. Both felt, maybe, that heaven and hell were in a battle within the confines of the park. Each different band or musician, some angel or demon in disguise, trying to sway one or the other to their side. Heaven was naturally the vibrant, uplifting, kaleidoscopic colors of New Orleans jazz. Hell, of course, was the anger, the rage, the sorrow, and the angst of the heart-wrenching Mississippi Delta blues. Louis Armstrong Park was ground zero for their war in those early evening hours. One or the other would be second-lining souls to the cloudless heights of bliss, or dragging them in chains to that roaring blaze of eternal torment. Which side this blues master was on should have been obvious. But what about the regular musicians and street performers? The ones who couldn't summon heaven or hell at their will? That group, believe me or not, were just your average mortals. Spread out musicians, street artists, and maybe grifters, turning guitar chords and chorus, art, and the like into gold and silver. Just fallible, tormented, laughable, corruptible mortals trying to earn a buck. Our curious musician wrapped up the song, sending sparks from his guitar strings. Another song was belted, and the blues master kept the same intensity and heart-rendering pleas afire with that ballad of heartache and angst. It was an equally powerful rendition of Robert Johnson's classic Crossroad Blues. From the little crowd that had gathered, raucous applause, screams, and whistles were directed at the blues master's epic playing. On the final chord, I guess to garner his well-deserved wages, the blues master caught everyone off guard with his concluding words. Some laughed, thinking what he said was a jest. Some did not. "I'm Robert Johnson," the old man bellowed to the crowd.
and damn glad to entertain ya.
While many stared, stunned, the blues man brought out a razor's edge smile to ease them. Robert Johnson, if that truly was his name, then gleamed about, casting a disquieting stare from his perch in the shadows. He feigned a sense of disquieted empathy for all in attendance. The mood then changed when he opened his smiling mouth to display pearl teeth, which peculiarly had pointed incisors. One of the teeth, from Caitlin's view, was covered in gold, which illuminated Robert's mouth as a golden mirror. To Caitlin, Robert Johnson's mouth seemed to be on golden fire. When he spoke his final line for the night to the crowd, she half expected him to breathe fire. With a maniacal, evil laugh, he cackled.
Y'all can pay me now. Or later.
After the blues performance, Tyler and Caitlin placed a few crinkled bills into the money box of Robert Johnson. Robert, as a coiled viper, broke his hypnotic gaze away from the dispersing crowd and reset it directly toward Tyler. Caitlin, stunned by the fluidity and speed of Robert Johnson's motion, watched the blues man erupt with a devilish golden smile toward Tyler. Robert then beckoned Tyler to lean in toward him. To Caitlin's growing dread, she watched, fearing in terror that the blues man might rip out Tyler's throat with those pointed teeth. Then, when her worst fears didn't occur, Caitlin eased up a little. Caitlin watched as Robert Johnson whispered the strangest thing to Tyler, straining to hear the blues man's words to her boyfriend. Caitlin caught most of what the strange musician was saying.
About tracks on easels in the cemetery, sir. St. Louis Cemetery number 3, my friend. You get on out there if you want that Pokemon power, my friend. And if I'm lying, I'm dying. And the devil take my soul, sir, was the old man's bellowed promise.
Tyler, what did he say? What did he mean by that? Caitlin was perplexed by the old man's whisper to her boyfriend. The man acted as if he and Tyler had been friends forever. It was a little unnerving for the Bayou girl to see. That funny guitar man told me where to find Baltraxonesals. Awesome, huh? Tyler was so obsessed with the Pokemon Go search, he missed the obvious. Caitlin tried to rationalize with Tyler. Tyler, how did the blind man even know you were looking for it? He's blind. Something is wrong with him and his guitar playing. He's weird, I'll give you that, Caitlin. But if he's right, we go home early, honey. We go home winners. Tyler responds, not listening to a word of warning from Caitlin. It was so typical of him. Tyler, he is more than weird. I don't know what it is about him I don't like. Maybe it was the glowing mouth, or the way he plays that guitar, or it could be the way he makes me feel the blues in my soul. All of it just unhinges me. She took a deep sigh before continuing. And how can you forget that last part? The man said he's the Robert Johnson. A dead man, you know. There's something we aren't seeing at work here. I believe with certainty that he is crazy, or there is something out of place about him. Maybe he is just a lunatic with a mean rip. I know, it's a stretch. But what I don't know, Caitlin, is any other way, short of cheating, for us to win Pokemon Go. Tyler cracks his neck, looking out toward the direction of the cemetery before speaking again. Maybe you got it all wrong. Maybe he's just got out of the nursing home or blind home and is trying to make a few bucks before they throw him back in. Didn't I read somewhere that handicapped people get like superpowers or senses when they lose a limb or eye? Tyler explains, exasperated. Caitlin shakes her head incredulously. You think this guy would be in a nursing home? Did you and I watch the same performance? In superpowers? Yeah, I said he might have enhanced abilities due to being blind. Tyler interrupted. He's half blind, you moron. But as for your superpower theory, maybe in a comic book, Tai-Tai? Caitlin knew the only thing Tyler hated more than Tai-Tai was when she called him a moron. Maybe his anger would see sense in her words. Caitlin's tactic didn't work. I don't care what you say. I know that I'm not a moron too. How do you explain how he knew what we were looking for? The only thing that makes logical sense is Robert Johnson has super duper hearing. His hearing is so great that he heard us talking on the other side of the park. Tyler is making about as much sense as a fool. Caitlin pushed her brown hair out of her face, skeptically looking at her stubborn boyfriend, and sighed, saying, he heard us talk half a mile across the park. It is ludicrous to think he had that kind of bad hearing. She saw Tyler's confusion at the word ludicrous. She took a breath and explained, it makes no sense. Maybe he's empathetic. Possibly he's got one of the first Neuralinks? Tyler was trying to sound intelligent. He's not an empath. And no again on the Neuralink. Well, at least not yet, Tai-Tai. What you meant is that you believe he's telepathic. I say no again. I'd much rather believe he could hear like a bat. Caitlin finally conceded. Oh, I see what you're saying. Then, as if Tyler had heard nothing Caitlin had just said, he continued. We had better hurry before the fog rolls in. Caitlin, perplexed, asked sarcastically, where are we going? Tyler, in practically a sprint to the car, said without a pause, St. Louis Cemetery, number 3. Valtrexel Neasels is by Nicolas Cage's Pyramid Tomb. A cemetery in New Orleans
In the ghetto? At night? Are you crazy? There's no way I can go in there, Tai-Tai. No frickin' way.
Caitlin's wide brown eyes grew owl-like in utter disbelief. Fine, you stay outside the cemetery and I'll get the super level. I'm going to get him and I'm not going back. Tyler shouted stubbornly. He was so determined now. In Caitlin's mind, there was no reasoning with the idiot. Some people, she reminded herself, have to learn the hard way. Earlier, the couple had crushed it like a skull playing Pokemon Go. Accompanied with his girlfriend, Caitlin Dupre, Tyler Poitier was having the greatest game of his life. Together, they had racked up big time on Pokemon Go. Their gamble of coming to New Orleans had reaped them epic rewards. Over by the Mall of Clearview, Tyler had located a coffin. At Louis Armstrong Park, Caitlin chased down Electabuzz and even a Pidgey. But the real excitement came when, unbelievably, they captured a Drowsy. And just moments ago, Tyler had scored what was thought to be a gamer myth, Zapdos. That one they found by an abandoned yacht slip on Lake Pontchartrain. Tyler thought, what could be more exciting and totally unexpected than wrapping up Pokemon Go in a cemetery? Especially a cemetery in haunted New Orleans. And allegedly the most haunted cemetery of them all. Oh, damn glass! Tyler moved slowly with his hand on his right knee. On his careless ascent over the cemetery wall, he had banged his right knee on broken glass. The glass, a cemetery security deterrent, had been carefully embedded in the top portion of the high walls of the cemetery. The glass had done its job well. There was now a nasty gash oozing red blood from Tyler's pasty, hairless knee. For 500 years, the walls had protected the dead. For 500 years, tombstones and crypts and this glass-covered wall had deterred the disturbing and desecration of corpses. And others not quite dead. Owie! Stupid glass! You won't stop me from getting you, Baltrexo. No, ow! It won't. Tyler sat down on top of an aged skull-white crypt. He made a half-hearted attempt to pull out the shard of glass. Right then, he wished his mommy was there to pull the ouchie and give him medicine and a band-aid. Looking at his phone and talking more to himself. You will not get away. Tyler, you okay? I heard you yell. Why did you say a bad word? Casper Von Doggy would bark at you for saying a bad word. Caitlin inquires and complains, trying to get Tyler to give up his quest. Caitlin, upon hearing Tyler's scream, had run back to the cemetery wall. She was again standing in her previous spot outside the cemetery at the wall's base. She had looked up the decaying, crumbling wall with doe-like brown eyes and onto the location of her crying boyfriend. Earlier tonight, they had fought for over an hour about coming to New Orleans. Later, a second argument erupted while they ran all over Louis Armstrong Park at night looking for Pokemon Go avatars. Now, with Tyler's new insane tip, they had the final argument in a New Orleans ghetto next to the dark wall of a cemetery. Caitlin thought, it was one thing, mister, to walk through a mall in New Orleans to find Pokemon Go strength points. But now, Tai-Tai, This is an insane situation hiking through a cemetery at night. A cemetery that is dark, full of bugs, roaches, worms, spiders, and all manner of crawlies. Not to mention, it's the most haunted cemetery in the world. Angrily whispering to Tyler, Caitlin argued again. This is stupid, Tyler. Let's just go home before you further hurt yourself or get yourself killed. If you are a scared baby, then go on back to the car. Go on. Be a coward and just go. I can find Baltrexoneasels, Mew, and Muto myself. It's not like you wanted to go to New Orleans anyway. Tyler's nasal, whiny voice is the only sound being heard amongst the tombs. From Caitlin's vantage point, all she hears is his childish taunt. It sounded like the annoying drone of mosquitoes. But then again, it could have been pesky flies. Fine, butthole. You cut yourself on broken, probably diseased glass over this stupid game. You're stubborn and selfish, like Mama says all the time. And by the way, the entire family is still mad at you for selling out Pawpaw on the shrimp boat. They'll be furious if they find out you have me out here in this dump. She brushes back her brown hair with lithe little fingers, huffs under her breath, and turns to head toward the car. Why did you call me a butt? Well, you know what you said. Tyler is perplexed that she is actually leaving when they are so close to Baltrexoneasels. He tries one last desperate attempt with taunts as Caitlin heads to the car. Fine, I'll find him and you'll be jealous. Caitlin makes her own last gasp to guilt the moron to leave the cemetery. Maybe she can reach out to some part of Tyler's selfish heart. I'm going to the car. I told you it's a school night, Tyler. I have college in the morning. I'm already on probation and doing extra credit because of you and Pokemon Go. If you love me, you'll get out of that place now and get me home. Caitlin was always the pacifist, the one who conceded in their relationship. She was the one who avoided the drama and conflict. She had enough of that role. Now, as her temper raged, Caitlin decided Tyler had gone too far. This was the final straw for this boyfriend. All she could think walking back to the car, kicking a rusty can, was, never, ever again. If I live through this dangerous night, and the dummy does too, I'm going to tell him we need a break. Yeah, Princess Poche and I will need a vacation from each other. Caitlin's grandpa had given Tyler the name after the shrimp boat misadventure. Tyler, to get out of his work, had snuck off the boat, the Black Magic, during the refuel at the dock. He hadn't even been on board 4 hours. Obviously disappointed, Pawpaw had said to the family, that boy needs to grow up and grow a pair. Tyler lasted 3 hours before he jumped ship and went home. That boy, the world revolves around him like a prince. Wait a minute. He's too mushy to be a prince. Tyler's more like a princess. From then on, everyone in the family, especially Mom and Dad, called Tyler Princess behind the couple's back. Now, Caitlin could see why. Tai was a selfish narcissist. She'd been warned that he didn't put Caitlin first in their relationship. How many times had Mama told her that Tai believed the world revolved around only his needs? Caitlin remembered too many to count. I'm such a fool, Caitlin murmured, feeling ashamed. She had sunk to Tyler's level and even said a bad word when she cursed at him. But then her anger reignited when she thought of her struggling grades in school. She stomped on in the dark, thinking how her current academic struggles were all based on Tyler, Princess Pochier's selfishness. A selfishness on full display with his obsession to obtain a win at all cost with this Pokemon Go game. I hope the tetanus was worth it, butthole. Caitlin giggles and snorts wickedly. Then rather nervously, after looking over her shoulder 3 times, she begins running to her car alone in the dark. 2. A desiccated, dried corpse, lifeless Anton Valtaire, rests inside a dark crypt. This decayed crypt lies up against the very wall Tyler Pochier has just climbed over, bleeding. Tyler now stands on the crumbling, ageless crypt, thinking it's secure, and the dead within long deceased. He was wrong on both accounts. The crumbling sepulcher was a quiet rest for both dead and undead. Cobwebbed darkness companioned Anton within its withered confines. Truly, the vampire had been a body at temporary peace, emaciated, shriveled, leathered in appearance. Anton's undying corpse was an illusion of death. What was this creature in stasis? Who had Anton Valtaire been? Why was he resting in St. Louis Cemetery, number 3 now? To answer, he was a tormented, soulless being. He was a cursed creature. Once, he was a mortal, fallible, and arrogant man. Later, he was a man blinded by rage, demanding vengeance against those who had done him wrong. An unforgiving pirate who bargained his very soul to Lucifer when his pleas were ignored. Prayers in vain that had fallen flat on the ears of a vacant God. Anton gave all in a fiery, maddening rage of vengeance. Bartering his precious soul was easy after what he had witnessed. Such horrors, such savage atrocities, such abhorrent acts, all committed against his wife, and he helpless to do nothing. No nightmares from the deepest pits of Avernus could equal what Anton Valtaire and his beloved Marie endured. Anton Valtaire, even now, carries eternally, maddeningly, and insanely these thoughts of Marie. I hear her screams. I am in darkness. I hear her shrieks. I am unable to act. I hear her pleas, then silence. I sob in the lightning and darkness. Beloved and cherished Marie. Marie with the radiant smile. Marie the loving, the kind, and the caring. Anton's partner, his wife, who had been carrying their child. Tied and tortured to a ship's mast with her husband, Marie would not yield. Marie would never be broken. She would never consent to the savage pirates' demands, these wretches that had attacked their ship and imprisoned she and Anton. The same damned bastards stabbed Marie through her heart. Bound next to Marie, helpless to save her, Anton was forced to watch her murder, forced to feel his failure to save Marie and their unborn child.
Tortured beyond belief, he remained tied to her corpse and suffered watching her rot away. How many days Anton lay tied to her rotted body, no one alive can say. As she oozed away, the green flies swarmed, and Anton raged. As the seagulls came to pick the eyes of her corpse, Anton's madness grew as a flickering flame. Insanely he babbled to all who would hear. Hell itself finally answered his prayers. The fires of vengeance ablaze, and the fury of a bloodbath to the men responsible brought the madman hysterical glee. As the pact with the devil was cast, Anton headed into damnation gladly. Everyone saw as cloven hooves thundered the sea skies red. Black prayers brought arcs of blistering fire overhead. Arcs, no doubt, from the clawed talons of Lucifer. Anton's prayer reached all the rulers of hell who championed his cause for blood natural. Lightning struck the ropes, freeing Anton Valtaire. The same blast incinerated Marie's rotted corpse. Thankfully, the pirates who murdered her weren't so lucky. Anton Valtaire was freed to torture, to bleed, to cannibalize the monsters who murdered Marie. And, per the bargain between Lucifer and Anton, Marie was brought back. With a catch, as the devil is always in the details. That sad tale is perhaps for another time. Here we are now, back in St. Louis Cemetery, number 3. Anton is a defeated vampire. Centuries have passed since he was given the vampire gift. A few years have gone by since his first defeat to humans. He recovers from near fatal wounds. In a blissful hibernation, he listened and waited to rise. This had been the closest he had ever been to death, and he was enjoying the solitude. If it took an eternity to return to the blood hunt, Anton Valtaire did not care. He was a patient creature. He was a calculating creature. Who knows, he might stay in the solace and seclusion amongst the tombs indefinitely. His slumber might last until the great star Polaris aligned. Anton's slumber in that instant could be 10,000 years. 10,000 years, Anton Valtaire might be allowed to rest and wait. Those glorious, ageless years where the beautiful music of Polaris could conjure all manner of dimensions in time and space from the spears. In this slumber, could he die? Was he in the throes of certain death? Certainly not. He is undead, undying, immortal. Was he a man between the borders of heaven and hell? Hell for sure. There was no redeeming this lost creature. Too much blood was on his hands. What about purgatory for Anton Valtaire? No way in hell. What the Devil of Black Bayou, Anton Valtaire, could say to you, I wouldn't meet with him for your sake, is he is an unforgivable creature of the night. He embraced his cursed, undead, imprisoned, and ever-binding chains, immortality. Yes, these are the words that he would say catch fire and ignite his furnace soul. Vanquished vampire, self-entombed within a crumbling crypt within the walls of St. Louis Cemetery, number 3. He heals aged wounds from horrendous battle. A decisive human versus vampire battle that cost him his island sanctuary of Avalon, land of the devil's beast. But, again, that's a tale for another time. Where's the blood? Was all Anton Valtaire could think in his current slumber. Blood was not far to be found. It was the smell of life that reeked in Anton's nose. It was the coppery scent emanating from oozing blood. He smelled fresh blood as it dripped out of Tyler's crimson cut. That blood woke the vampire's senses. It was the same jagged laceration pouring streams of scented red rose, auburn, and indigo. It was the essential life force pouring from Tyler's blood that drove razor vampire teeth clicking alive. Tyler, unaware of the danger, obliviously distracted by Pokemon Go, continued his missteps. If he was not careful, and he wasn't, he'd be easy prey for those same teeth. It was the taste of a single drop of blood splattered down into crypt crevices that awoke the Nosferatu. It was the blood that dripped from that crevice onto the mouth of Anton that churned his stomach. The same blood igniting the creature's frenzy to flame alive, to kill and eat. The same fresh blood drummed awake the vampire in chorus with his victim's heartbeat. The scent and the taste of fresh blood had awakened Anton Valtaire. The desecrating noises that had disturbed his slumber, noises that could have awakened any dead, brought his furious rage. For starters, there was the chalkboard screeching and scraping of Tyler's scramble while dragging glass across his knee, climbing up the wall. The second egregious slight to Anton had been Tyler's drop onto the crypt roof. The rumble and crumble that was followed by Tyler Pochier's drop onto the crypt roof further infuriated the bloodthirsty beast. Adding to the noise, insult was the pitter and patter, like a heavy rain of falling earth and masonry onto Anton Valtaire's rising corpse. Finally, if you asked the vampire directly, I wouldn't recommend it. The disgusting feminine screams and gasp of Tyler. He babbled and cooed to Anton's genuine disgust. The babbling became so horrendous that Anton almost skipped his meal. Seeing the crypt collapsed, seeing his means of leaving eradicated by a foolish drop onto a rickety crypt, Tyler began to cry uncontrollably. These cries, above all else, drove Anton Valtaire insane with fury. Protesting, childlike whimpers and cries made the vampire's blood boil. The cacophony of despair, coupled with the crypt damage, pretty much moved Tyler Pochier's time to live up on the vampire's feeding schedule. Well, it almost moved him up. Tyler currently sat confused on the side of the crypt he had just collapsed. The ancient structure obviously collapsed when Tyler made his jump down into the cemetery. With just a shard of light from his phone, Tyler realized quickly that his right leg had been injured. Also, he noted in horror something large, glass, was stuck in it. Tyler's heart began to beat uncontrollably. It and his breathing increased from shock as he began to hyperventilate. Upon further realization, he saw an object shiny and possibly blue or green glass protruding from his upper knee. Tyler realized at this moment that his whole right leg was covered in blood. It was in the same moment of realization that Tyler Pochier screamed. Tyler's mind raced fanatically. What could have happened? How could Tyler have not noticed he had lost so much blood? When had glass gotten stuck in his leg? Could he get the glass out of his leg?
He'd felt something when he had climbed over the wall. A tug at first to his pants leg. Then, of course, a stinging, numbing pain in his right knee. Subsequently, this was followed by something warm running down his right leg. Now, on the other side of the wall and into the cemetery's treacherous sanctum, the moment Tyler feared had arrived. This was the direct examination to his knee and leg to determine exactly how bad the injury was. Astonished, he saw the object had been a shard of glass, jagged green glass. Tyler sat and stared in numbing disbelief as he looked on the glass shard caked in his own blood. A shard plunged and locked in his right knee. Cold sweats broke out all over Tyler from shock. In horror, he now realized what the warmth had been when he made his scramble over the wall. Blood had been that warmth running down his leg. Now, that same blood had long since clotted and dried. Panicked and hysterical, he went to pulling unsuccessfully on the glass to remove it. Terrified and screeching, Tyler again tried unsuccessfully to pull the large shard of green glass out of his leg. Praying and sobbing, squealing as a suckling pig, he managed, luckily, to pull the glass out on the third try. To his surprise, it didn't bleed too much. Of course, there was no one in the cemetery, no one living, that is, to celebrate his success. Tyler had no one to share his exultations with except the darting and flittering bats flying overhead, the ghostly white moths weaving out of the distant corner streetlights, and the ebony roaches scurrying on the ground beneath him. With Caitlin not around, and just these creatures of the night for solace, Tyler felt comfortable and without shame to again cry just a little. It was a cry of joy and relief. There was one more small fragment of blue glass that had lodged in Tyler's knee. This one was easier to remove. After taking a deep breath, saying a prayer or two, he squinted, then chose not to as he managed to dislodge the second and final piece of glass from his flesh. He recalled later that the sound was similar to sucking jello through a straw. Optimistically, Tyler studied his cut. The cut, when he weakly looked, was a few inches in length and probably deep, but it was hard to tell how deep with the waning light of the phone. Tyler couldn't deduce, nor did he want to know the severity out here in the darkness and rot of the cemetery. It was better to fix it up with a torn shirt or something to keep it from bleeding anymore. Besides, he might get lucky and not need a tetanus shot. All Tyler Poche could think was, "It's too dark out here in this creepy place. I need better lighting to see if I need a hospital. Or am I kidding? I know I need one." He sobbed, and sighed, several times, defeated by his predicament and his injury. Then strangely, Tyler got angry while he slammed and slapped his hands hard against the wall of the tomb he was lying against for comfort. It wasn't long before he went back to the panicked, exclaiming again in the shadows of the tombs. "I have a bad owie. I don't have a good light to see how bad is my owie. I'm hurt, and Caitlin left me out here with this stupid cell phone. And yucky roo, I can't stand blood." Mumbling maniacally and incoherently murmuring under his breath, Tyler Poche, aspiring Pokemon Go champion, continued his rant. Okay, I'm better. Caitlin, I'm sorry I got mad, but my owie hurts really bad. I'll make it up to you. I'll bring Casper Von Doggy to get 2 treats and groomed. And that's when the realization of what he'd done hit. Our hammer of guilt hit him with the force of a hellbound train. An overwhelming dread rose as a ghost and smacked Tyler squarely in his hard head. It was the realization that Caitlin had done as he had told her. Caitlin had wisely fled to the safety of her car to wait for Tyler to gain some sense. Caitlin had the security from the darkness. Caitlin had the warmth and solace of her car. Caitlin had no owie. Caitlin would be the one who would say, "I told you not to go, stupid." She had left him alone in the growing chill of these tombs. Caitlin had abandoned him in the dreaded darkness of the night, confined to this haunted cemetery and its fetid fog. Caitlin had left him hobbled and hurting amongst the decaying dead. Caitlin Dupre, perfect, rule-following, uninjured Caitlin, was hated by Tyler now. But was it his fault? Tyler stubbornly felt it was not. How could it be his fault? Why did she leave? She had quit on the game, and that was not cool. All they had left to do was find Valtrexoneasels, and they'd be on the next level. If she had climbed over the wall with him, Tyler would have been more careful. He never thought that maybe, just maybe, Caitlin might have gotten injured too. 3. The cemetery was now a shadowed labyrinth where all manner of creatures might dwell. The shadows were perceived as uninviting, possibly deadly, and ominous to the hobbling Tyler Poche. He felt wraiths and reapers encircled and haunted over him in that maze of growing fog, crypts, and dead. In his imagination, long, ghastly, unknown wraiths encircled the stubborn youth as he stared on in the growing, stretching shadows of the crypts and tombs. The cemetery took on an otherworldly appearance. Twisted, dead flowers were reaching skeleton hands. Rusted, twisted crosses were grim reapers in robe and scythe. A feral cat's shadow tiptoeing on a hunt, elongated to a sinister witch hovering over Tyler's head. In Tyler's fear-stricken mind, the scratchy rasp of crickets became the wailing cry of a banshee. Scurrying, shrieking rats became lumbering ghouls dragging and gnawing away at rotted grotesqueries out of the graves. Writhing worms or maggots became lumbering, twisting beasts of Lovecraftian design, such as Nyarlathotep, Yog-Sothoth, or Hastur. In total blinding darkness, Tyler slid and stalked on down to below fog level. While sliding, he continued to imagine all sort of monstrosity in the abyss that was the St. Louis Cemetery. As night progressed and his phone battery began to dwindle, dread grew. The longer Tyler remained in this cemetery, the more he realized he would have limited or no illumination to continue his walk or escape. It was now about getting out of this place and returning another time for the location of Valtrexoneasels. For now, he must get out of here. What further terrors awaited Tyler? along his sojourn? Could he stay here all night, injured? Many possibilities ran through his mind. Briefly, the possibilities stayed, that is, until Tyler's anxiety erupted to full terror at another scurrying, hidden thing out there in the cemetery's darkness. All Tyler Poche could think then was, I'm in a world of real monsters now. No way I'm staying here any longer. No effing way. Oops. I almost said a really, really bad word. Pleading loudly to the silence and mist, not caring about his pride now that he was severely hurt, Tyler screamed in a whining screech. Dalen, I need you. Dalen, please come help me. I need help walking because I have a bad owie. The crypt behind him rumbled briefly and shook. That's a little weird, Tyler thought. The wind must have done it. It had to be the howling wind playing tricks and shaking these old structures. Tyler thought again. I must have moved something inside when I climbed over the wall. Nervously, Tyler shined his phone behind him. Vaguely, he could see a dark purple and burgundy trail of blood. It was a long, snake-like trail of blood, Tyler's own blood, that went winding on for quite a while. He tried to figure the total distance of the bloodline and how long he'd been walking. He got confused several times with the math and guessed badly. It could have been at least half a mile to a full mile back. While calculating the distance a fourth time, Tyler re-examined his right knee injury with the dwindling phone light. To his dismay and disgust, he saw blood had begun to ooze again. This owie wasn't going to stop bleeding, even with his bandage. Tyler would certainly need to go to a hospital if he ever got out of here. Trying to get motivated despite his injury and the danger, Tyler Poche blindly obsessed again and said out loud to no one, Okay, we still try for Baltrexonezels. I know they might have monsters in here, but we can't come back to this scary place again. It's too scary and dangerous, and I don't want another owie. We get out of this cemetery by Nicolas Cage's pyramid. Then we get the owie fixed as a winner. A second, more profound, shifting noise from the collapsing, decrepit crypt way behind him startled our hapless Pokemon Go champion. This shifting of the crypt brought small clouds of dust, bone fragments, and mold through the walls of the tombs, cracks, and crevices. A far-off rustling sound, as of leathered wings, unnerved Tyler for a reason he could not explain. The new sound, with its weird, leathered movement and that equally hideous noise, made Tyler jump. In that terrified instant, Tyler voided his bladder just briefly. The frightened man embarrassingly squirted out a little urine on himself. He exclaimed in disgust at the event, Oh man, yucky roo! Tyler looked down at the growing dark stain in the small crotch area of his pants. Admonishingly shamed, he shook his head in disgust. He thought thankfully, on the bright side, at least I didn't crap my pants yet. Wet from fog and fear-filled perspiration, injured and hobbled from the green glass that had pierced his knee, and equally bloody from the same injury, Tyler moved as fast as he could to safety outside the cemetery. The man-child became increasingly aware that there were added burdens coming his way. Clouds of dense fog and crypt debris. As Tyler Poche continued to progress slowly, the chilled night fog grew denser the more he stumbled on. Then came the newly formed dust clouds from the collapsed crypt. Both cloud and fog impeded his sight and increasingly hampered Tyler's ability to see. Confusion and disorientation set in on just where he was at times. More collapse of the crypt and more chilling night fog brought more vision and location hindrance. To his credit, despite these obstacles, Tyler kept optimistic and hopeful. He moved as hurriedly as his injury would let him. It seemed Tyler Poche's goal of leaving this god-awful cemetery might soon be rewarded by his perseverance. Onward he traveled to the north side of the cemetery, to the location of the pyramid tomb, and hopefully an easier climb out of the place. In his hobbled great haste, Tyler was stumbling and tripping over loose bricks and old flower vases. Earnestly, he looked for any other avenue which could possibly render a more rapid exit out of the St. Louis cemetery. Continuing to hope with all his heart, Tyler never relented in his search. Maybe, just maybe, he'd find a crack in the wall, a collapsed wall, or even a ladder to climb out, without having to climb back across the glass-encrusted tops of the cemetery fence. Certainly, Tyler Poche didn't need any more injuries or any more trouble now. Scooby-Doo, this place is too spooky for you. Time to say adieu, Scooby-Doo. Tyler whispered the little rhyme to ease the tension and the fear gnawing in his skull. As Tyler further hobbled, he couldn't help the growing agitation and impatience as more fog and more dust rolled into the cemetery. Dread became ever palpable, while the crypt shadows reached ever longer in the darkness, and the quiet of the dead echoed in silence. Tyler Poche could not wait to get out of the creepy, crawling place. The more he thought of the phantasms that may or may not have been in the darkness, the more his dread grew. Slithering shadows caused his hobbled pace to increase to a walk. The increased walk, as fright edged into his mind, turned into a slightly brisker walk. The brisker walk, as fright became terror, advanced to a staggered run. It was at this state of emotion that Tyler's panic became palpable. The staggered run became a chaotic full sprint. In his full sprint, all manner of devil was conceived by Tyler Poche in those horrid moments of unhinged terror. Horrific, conjured thoughts raced and ran in the chaos of Tyler's hysteria. In the greatest moments of his horrors, Tyler would truly believe he had found a possible place to escape the beast of the cemetery. The escape was naturally an illusion of hope and not a true escape from the madness and mayhem Tyler found himself in now, from his preconceived monstrosities. The cemetery always was one step ahead of him, thwarting his hope and crushing it with the reality that he was never going to escape St. Louis Cemetery number 3. Sometimes, as he raced in mind and spirit, hope would return to steady him and overcome Tyler's despair. Finally, in a sort of miracle for Tyler Poche, hope won back over his terror-filled mind. He could focus again after all the hysteria and terror-filled escapades. He was able to reorganize a game plan to escape the cemetery. After nearly 2 hours of hysterical panic, Tyler was able to regroup and rethink rationally. He was able to once again focus and find the best course to climb out of the cemetery without further injury. What would Tyler, or as Caitlin had called him, Princess, do once he was outside the cemetery? Obviously, he would have to avoid being noticed or detected by the cops. He'd have to avoid causing any more large noises and destruction that were sure to garner detection and subsequent arrest. No more collapsed crypts to wake up the neighborhood. Tyler's refocused awareness now included minimalizing the noises of his escape and avoiding at all cost any further destruction to the cemetery. He concluded that if he had another disastrous collapse, most assuredly the destruction would alert cops or someone, and that was not going to happen ever again. A buzzing sound interrupted his attempts at planning and escape. Tyler Poche reconvened and tried to plan again his escape from the cemetery. He went to evaluating a new area to climb out of the cemetery. The buzzing started again relentlessly. Tyler stopped again to recollect his thoughts. He thought a third time on how to escape the cemetery without any further incident. Again, in the middle of thought and deliberations, the buzz went off. While thinking, but, he turned to look at his phone app. Tyler was astounded by where he had ended up. By chance, in the dark, and by total luck, he had found something profound. Tyler Poche looked up with disbelief. What he saw was the 30-foot high by 30-foot wide pyramid-shaped tombstone owned by Nicolas Cage. "Baltrexonizos!" Tyler exclaimed triumphantly, forgetting his fear and his plan briefly. After all the blood, all the injury, and all the terror, Tyler Poche could not and would not leave here without him. Tai had bled for this one, damn it. And if Caitlin wasn't here now to share in his triumph over evil and to get his cherished points, then Tyler thought, oh well, now was the time, despite everything against it. This was what Tyler had obsessed about since climbing into this crummy place. This was his one chance to secure the coveted prize. So, in his limited vision, Tyler thought if he cut to the right, then to the western side of the cemetery, and skated along the furthest wall, he could straight shoot to the middle area in a few minutes. He had plenty of time to find a better exit. Besides, the location of Baltrexonizos might be the exit. Wouldn't that be something? Tyler Poche just knew in his bones Baltrexonizos would be his. The spot was right across from him now. There he knew the Pokemon Go avatar would show itself, and he would find certain safe escape. Hurrying to the avatar's location, Tyler was startled by a blasting noise. Kaboom! The rest of that crypt, the one Tyler had damaged on his entry into the cemetery, had just made its final collapse. It was a mind-numbing, echoing noise. The collapse released greater waves of dust. More human remains everywhere. Tyler was covered once again in the clouds of dust and human debris, inhaling some as it enveloped him. Truly repulsed, Tyler thought, "I'll be lucky for sure to not catch something. With my luck, I'll get some fine fallopian fungus and just die." Tyler dusted himself off once again, coughed profusely, and continued on, moving, hobbling, and dragging his injured leg. He headed to the Avatar's preconceived location. The whole while, he couldn't take his mind off the increased aching to his cut as he approached the furthest part of the wall. Another trail of blood could be seen with each glance backwards. Onward he continued, thinking it funny how the blood might be following him instead. Growing unease, then growing dread, reared themselves again in Tyler. Unnerving and irrational fear had returned, coaxed and conjured by those ghostly shadows. Shadows as wraiths and reapers, hovering above and encircling around him, ever growing, ever reaching out toward him. Macabre, imagined beast also returned, ebbing and flowing within the ever-changing tendrils of mist. Something unseen, a demoniacal creation, had altered the shadows before him. Something hidden, revealed in a chance glance. It formed further and rested before him. Something that Tyler would swear had not been there the last time he had turned and glanced around. "Oh!" Tyler screamed out. The presence was now before him. The shape of what exactly? He wasn't quite sure. It was an ominous creature that had suddenly appeared with intended harm on Tyler. It was time to battle. It was time to attack before it had revealed itself. Though shaken from the sudden materialization and startled by its solidified form, he knew he must act and attack first. All Tyler Poche could think was, "I know that I have been foolish, but you will not claim this hapless fool." Tyler dropped to all fours, hoping against all hope not to be detected by whatever was lurking in the darkness. While crouching in the shadows away from the unknown being, Tyler desperately looked for a weapon. Down on his belly, in the cemetery dust and gravel, decayed bone dust and earth, Tyler found the crumbles of a brick. He picked up the brick hastily, aimed wildly, and launched the brick at the shadow creature. Within that same moment, and while performing the throwing motion, Tyler got up and sprinted terrified to the safety and seclusion of an adjacent area of crypts. Once he reached the crypts, Tyler stopped immediately. He dropped, tucked down, and poorly attempted to roll into a ball. In absolute pain, he tried rolling toward a recessed corner of the cemetery. The moves were far from graceful, more like a spastic dry heave set to really bad music. In the same instant of his throw and run, Tyler scores a direct hit on the beast. The decayed brick connects with the fearsome shadow creature, an eroded and broken winged statue of St. Michael. Tyler hears the crack of the brick in the darkness as it connects with something made of possibly concrete. He staggers up to go and look cautiously. To Tyler Poche's disappointment, yet relief, he sees that his malign target now has another broken wing. It's an aged cemetery statue of St. Michael, for sure, upon further detailed inspection. Again, greatly relieved it's not a ghoul or grave robber, Tyler laughs nervously. He turns, shaking his head, and hobbles forward to finish his quest. Tyler thought, if Caitlin had seen me scared and throwing a brick at a stupid statue, would she have laughed? He knew, of course, she would have. Just her laughing at him enraged Tyler, and he became red-faced with embarrassment. After a moment hobbling and one last glance at the broken statue, Tyler regained himself and giggled, under mumbled breath with a little sarcasm. I guess I slayed the cemetery beast, eh, St. Michael? Tyler paused a moment, turned from his pursuit, and went back to the statue. He bent down to make sure it was a statue, then laughed at what he had just said. Before starting to walk again, he had louder gallows laughs with St. Michael. Then on cue, he hobbled onward to the pyramid and Baltrexoneasels. All the while, in his sprint, he continued to rub the brick's red dust from his hands onto his torn pants. Tyler Potier hadn't been inside the walls of St. Louis Cemetery more than 2 hours, but already he shivered from graveyard air that was icy and chilled. It was the frosted bite of fall in late October throughout Louisiana. As Tyler remained trapped in the cemetery, mist chilled to frost. The frost streaked onto the tombs into a pageantry of liquid diamonds. These collected diamonds would later be seen in the first rays of morning sun glistening. The diamonds would sparkle not only the crypts, but surrounding fences, houses, and cars. For now, silence ruled the endless void of night. All activity was dormant in a kind of lifeless stasis. As it was earlier, activity remained as quiet as the graves, keeping Tyler company. Outside the cemetery, as in, was a gulf of stillness. The only exception on the streets, however, was the occasional bat darting in and out of the streetlights chasing a bug. The bats tittered and flittered between mats of silver and gray fog that continued to roll into the cemetery. Tendrils of chilled mist extending and twisting their wisp in cascading columns between the dark and ghostly haunted New Orleans rues and alleys. Caitlin, sitting in her car, shivered for other reasons, pure terror. With darkest night encroaching, Caitlin sat fidgeting with the car's locks, making sure they continued to work. Then she pressed and repressed the radio buttons, changing stations to distract her frightened mind. Finally, when all the music on the stations became annoying, Caitlin put her mind someplace else and started slapping her hands against the steering wheel unrhythmically. It was a vain attempt to make up her own tunes, rapping away at the wheel, locked safely or not. In her teal Grand Prix, she knew Tyler was in bad trouble. But no matter his calamity, Caitlin dared not leave her car now. She thought, it's too spooky out there. I'd never find him anyway in all that fog. More than likely, I'd get turned around in the cemetery and lost. Tyler would, of course, then find his way out to the car and laugh at me all the way home. The worst part would be stuck in all that mist, not seeing or knowing if the bugs would be crawling on me.
Caitlin shuddered at the ladder. Watching in further horror, she saw growing hordes of beetles, rats, and roaches flowing in with the fog banks toward the cemetery. Witnessing such a disgusting event didn't alleviate, but heightened her dread. The fog shrouding the creepy crawlies brought another layer of uncertainty in an already very dangerous city. And the only reason she was in any peril was because of her selfish boyfriend, Princess Poche. It was all Tyler's fault. Caitlin fidgeted further to the point her nails tore at the skin on her hands. The scratches, the tears, and broken fingernails bled profusely. But the pain distracted her fright exquisitely. As her nails and skin continued bleeding, Caitlin couldn't help the persistent habit of eyeing every shadow and staring incessantly at every dark alley and ghostly rue. Fear, unease, unnerving terror kept her awake and aware. As the night drug on, as Tyler's hobbled leg, Caitlin's fright and dread became even more palpable. There was the ever-growing certainty that Tai would never leave that godforsaken place. Exasperated at one point and aghast at the growing trails of rats and roaches, Caitlin furiously exclaimed,
"Tyler, where the heck are you?"
She looked on, the billowing clouds rolling up from the mighty Mississippi. Waves undulated and pulsed as a moving and breathing entity. Onward, the expanse of mist moved in to engulf the entire cemetery. Palpable dread, curious fascination, and spine-chilling fear inched its way up Caitlin's spine with each ticking minute of each torturous hour Tyler did not return. Each figure in the fog revealed to not be Tyler. Each specter disclosed a dog, a rat, and even a flittering bat, but never Tyler Poche. Each creature had made its way out of the mist, beyond those mystic waves of rolling fog, from the ghostly direction of that creepy cemetery. Caitlin had a brief respite of thankfulness. She was overjoyed that no strangers had threatened her in this ghetto. There had been no one out earlier tonight where she had parked. There would be no one out now, if ever. That meant no chances of vandalization or looting her vehicle. It was safe to reckon that no place near the cemetery be attacked. No untoward trouble would accost her. But Caitlin Dupre thought, isn't that curious in and of itself? No activity of any sorts in this area. As active as New Orleans is, I have seen no one walking, no one talking, and no music in this area. Again, it was still a busy time at night in the city that never sleeps. What was it now? 10 p.m.? And the cemetery and adjacent streets had nothing going on for a Saturday. A Saturday in New Orleans, and she was located just 3 blocks from the French Quarter. It was quite concerning now. Driving, growing, crawling, creeping dread was raising alarm in her. All of her instincts screamed at her to leave now. Caitlin spoke to a foggy window
imploring. "Oh, Tyler, stupid, doesn't even begin to cut it. Here, I hope you're okay."
Back in the cemetery, Tyler exclaimed triumphantly, "Valtrex of Measles, I will own you!" Previous terrors forgotten momentarily, Tyler surged forward with newfound courage to complete his obsessive quest for victory. Tyler took a moment to savor the last few feet. It had cost him blood. It had cost him tears. And, most certainly, it had cost him time. All of his foolish actions might even cost him Caitlin. And there was almost equal certainty. If Tyler was caught in here at this moment, he could be arrested for the statue damage. But, at least in Tyler Poche's mind, it had been worth all the pain, the tears, the terrors, and risk to win this Pokemon Go challenge. He took a moment to rest. His injured knee burned, and his leg was acting up something fierce. It was practically killing him now. The owie had grown into a burning throb. Without thinking or noticing the crypt he had been leaning on, Tyler put his phone on top of the crypt. Ironically, the crypt he chose was a magician of manufactured monsters as well, though hers were a little too real for Tyler. The crypt was of the great voodoo queen, Marie Laveau, but Tyler Poche wouldn't have known who she was, or care, for that matter. Leaning and bleeding further on her tomb, Tyler tore another piece of his shirt to bandage his hurt leg. After completing the makeshift bandage and having tied it loosely around the wound, he reached up for his phone. Tyler's phone was no longer there. "What the hell?" Tyler roared as he let his fingers fumble and search across the roof of the crypt in fog-filled darkness. He had felt all across the top of Marie Laveau's crypt. Each agonizing minute felt like torturous hours without reward. His efforts were all in vain. Without the precious phone, Tyler would be unable to locate and capture Valtrex of Measles. Furiously frustrated to have come so close only to lose his phone, Tyler screamed a multitude of obscenities into the night. Now, exhausted from searching and climbing and not finding his phone, Tyler sat down next to Marie Laveau's crypt and cried. Question after question rocketed and ricocheted in his mind. Did it fall on the ground? No. He searched 3 times with his hands in the dark. The phone wasn't there. Could it have tumbled, God forbid, into the crypt? He felt and saw as best he could in the darkness. There were no cracks or openings for the phone to fall through. Hope waned briefly as he thought of the last possibility. Maybe, just maybe, he put it on another crypt. In that cemetery's void, he crawled and climbed and scurried about all the crypts in the vicinity. He checked 4 disgusting, cobwebbed, encrusted tombs around him. No phone. The cataclysmic circumstances of his situation were dawning on him. Injured, in total darkness, and without his only light source, Tyler Poche was in the worst of the worst possibilities. The last of these circumstances was more crushing than the rest. He had lost his one chance for the Pokemon Go Level 5 victory. No Valtrex of Measles. After what seemed like hours, Tyler Poche made his way to escaping the cemetery, with tears pouring from his eyes as a heavy rain
he hobbled, staggered, and stumbled, defeated. On, Tyler ventured past Marie Laveau's crypt. Then he crossed near Nicolas Cage's pyramid to the north side of St. Louis Cemetery, number 3. Bloody and beaten, injured, and his heart crushed, the Pokemon Go contender sobbed uncontrollably. Leaving the cemetery without the prize and the loss of his phone, he angrily screamed, "Stupid Valtrexel Neasels! Stupid Pokemon Go game!"
Did you say Valtrexel Neasels? I see the name listed next to this most enchanting beast on this weird device. I guess what your kind call a phone? Quite the curiosity, I must say.
A sudden voice from the shadows above a crypt startled Tyler. It was so unnerving for the man-child to go from the stillness and quiet of the cemetery to a stranger's voice. Tyler Poche jumped uncontrollably upon hearing it. He hit the corner outcrop of another crypt before falling clumsily to the ground. The shadowed voice, with a French accent, continued to talk while chuckling.
My goodness, you look like you've seen a ghost.
Those spoken words from that voice to Tyler Poche seemed to echo all around him. To our hapless adventurer, it was as if the fog itself said the words to Tyler. All Tyler could take from the exchange is a stranger covered in the darkness of fog is speaking to him. A weird stranger, he noted, who just happens to be in the cemetery at the same time of the night as he is. Could he be searching for Valtrexel Neasels too? Tyler thought to himself. I have to be cautious. Maybe he's some sort of ghost. Or he's out here to win Pokemon Go too. If I'm not careful, I could lose the game. Who are you? Asked a nervous and agitated Tyler. A shape is there now, in the darkness. Tyler peers up to see a black shape in ghostly shadows of fog. A shape that is peculiarly lying on its side on top of the crypt. The form might be a man, as the voice indicated. Strangely, the man's apparent head is resting on a right hand and bent elbow, as if lounging on a couch instead of a crypt. The shadow man, to Tyler, speaks with robust authority and a distinct French Acadian accent. My young adventurer, are you asking me who I am? The shadow man asked back. Tyler replied and inquired back to the mysterious lounger. I did ask, sir. Didn't expect anyone in here, you know. You aren't a ghost, are you?
Ghost? Why no, I'm not a ghost. Just a simple admirer of stupidity. That's all. You do know that you caused quite a lot of desecration and damage in this cemetery tonight.
The drift of fog thins a little, and Tyler sees a brief outline of the shadowy figure cloaked in the fog. Tyler was correct. The figure is a man, but he's the strangest of sorts. Tyler notices that this individual has clothes which look dated. Pirates of the Caribbean dated, that is. Why are you dressed for Halloween? It's not for another 2 weeks. Tyler questions while he smacks his fist into his palm and continues. Or, wait a minute, could you be one of those haunted history tour guides? Tyler, forgetting the unusual situation and his abhorrent fear, starts regaining his courage and senses. His questions are becoming too encroaching for the stranger. Possibly, the questions are too bold and disrespectful. I find the outfit quite comfortable, and I'm a fan of pirate nostalgia, if you don't mind. The man is becoming a little clearer for Tyler. Tyler sees the man sit up. At this point, he can make out breeches, leathered boots, and emerald or possibly blue cloth shirt and jacket, but he's not sure. But what is for certain, the guy is wearing some type of pirate hat.
Well, don't that beat all? You are weird, sir, to be in a cemetery dressed like a pirate. Are you sure you aren't a ghost?
Tyler exclaims and inquires ever bolder.
I'm not a ghost.
The pirate answers, then says nothing more. Emboldened further and allowing his arrogance to simmer, Tyler starts with chiding and scolding the mysterious stranger. He certainly has missed, once again, the obvious. Tyler does not recognize the potential risk of having a conversation and scolding someone dressed in a pirate outfit in a dark, haunted cemetery in the middle of the night. Obviously, not one of his better moves.
Do you enjoy scaring people? I wasn't scared, not me, but you could have hurt somebody.
I would venture destroying a tomb where destroying a tomb is more dangerous, young man.
The pirate fired back, sighing in shame. Tyler agreed.
I guess you're all right, Mr. Pirate. I did make a mess of things when I dropped in. What was that other thing you said?
That was nothing, just a slip of my tongue. My thoughts get in the way of my teeth sometimes,
the pirate explained. After the last exchange, the conversation stalled a bit. The cemetery was quiet briefly. The pirate and Tyler said nothing for several minutes in the dark. Then the stranger became more visible somehow to Tyler. The boy saw the pirate stare intensely for a moment at him. His piercing eyes made the boy edgy and a little nervous. Again, it was just a moment, but enough to unnerve the man-child. Then, the pirate smiled and addressed Tyler warmly again. It was as if he and Tyler were the oldest of friends.
Now, for this most curious device and this hideous beast that objects on easels, tell me everything about this phone and this silly creature.
How the Shadow Man, the pirate, asked some of the most outrageous and outlandish questions to Tyler Poche. How the man's inquiries amused and aggravated the boy. Tyler thought the whole while,
this guy acts like he's never heard a Pokemon Go before. And I'm pretty sure, too, he's never had a phone. He must be one of those homeless pirates like they have in the French Quarter. Oh God, I hope he doesn't ask me for money.
With that thought in his head, Tyler moved back a bit from the pirate. He was thinking of running when Tyler took a closer look at the pirate's adornments. His daddy always told him you could tell a lot about a person by the jewelry or rocks they wore. In this instance, Tyler's dad was correct. The pirate carried multiple expensive rocks. The jewelry was enough to ease Tyler's concern. The man most certainly wasn't homeless. Onward, Tyler tried to figure the worth of the rings, of the chains, and the precious stones the pirate carried. He tried his math again, but the numbers were too low for what he was seeing. He finally decided the jewelry was worth thousands of dollars. Tyler excitedly thought, "This guy is a walking treasure chest. That one ring on the pirate's right hand has to be the largest ruby I've ever seen. It's so red, like blood, and it shimmers so weirdly, like the sun in the evening." Tyler was correct on what the stone was. It was a ruby ring of immense size on the Shadow Man's right index. Tyler continued thinking of other possibilities. "For sure, he's not a homeless pirate. He must be one of those rich French Quarter guys who wants to look like a poor pirate. Maybe he's Jimmy Buffett. Or maybe he really believes he's a pirate." To Tyler's relief, at least for now, it appeared the man wasn't a homeless thief. But for sure, the pirate wannabe was full-blown cuckoo. You would have to be a lunatic to wear jewelry like that in a New Orleans ghetto. Yeah, he was definitely crazy. Cautiously, making sure not to give away any pertinent Pokemon Go information to the pirate, Tyler continued answering the aggravating questions from the stranger. He still believed in his gut instincts that the pirate might truly be on the same quest. Tyler was sensing something disingenuous about the strange man. "Well, me and my girlfriend play Pokemon Go. You probably don't know what that is being older."
You guess right, Tyler. I'm quite older.
The pirate looked down at the glowing screen of the phone and Baltrexoneasels, then spoke in wonder.
Such profound new games of chance and sport. Truly an unbelievable age of technology to play these games, as you call them. Yes, they intrigue my curious mind. My games, back in the day, as they are now, are of chance.
Tyler interrupts. "Like bingo or roulette? My granny likes those chance games. She plays some mean Pedro. I bet she'd whip you." The pirate murmured.
I probably played a game or two with your grandma.
Tyler's taunt was turning out to be more annoying than the crypt falling in on the Shadow Man. But hell, it had been so long since he had a real laugh. Why not entertain himself a little before dinner? Maybe one more laugh from this fool. Why not learn of these new games? This new age certainly intrigued him.
Baltrexoneasels!
Exclaimed excitedly the Shadow Man. Then he clapped his hands together. "Yeah, what about him?" Tyler was startled by the speed of the pirate's slap and the excited emphasis of Baltrexoneasels by the shadowy figure. His rat-like eyes strained, and he positioned for a better view, trying to peer where the figure's hands were. The lightning-fast slap certainly caught him unaware.
I guess, before we continue our accord, fine sir, I should introduce myself.
The Shadow Man brought himself slightly into view. Tyler interrupted again. "Yeah, it's probably a good idea. My mama always said I start talking before knowing who I'm talking to. She said I caused a lot of problems with gossip talking to the wrong people. Do you have that kind of problem with gossip I
Tyler, focus.
The figure interrupted back. After a pause, the pirate spoke again.
I'm Anton.
Cool, man. I'm Tyler. Tyler doesn't catch the obvious question from his new friend. How does this stranger know his name? Was Anton toying with the food? Maybe. Did Tyler realize he was being toyed with? Most likely, no. Was this one of Anton's less redeeming qualities? Definitely. But in a strange way, like Tyler, he had learned to savor moments of victory in his own cursed bloodlust. Moments like these, when the endless gates to endless worlds would be opened briefly by a blood sacrifice. The blood, the life, would breach once again, spatially and temporally, the veil. With the veil between worlds thinned, the vampire could travel into another universe, another time, to his beloved wife, Marie. Anton sat upright on the crypt, revealing a little more of his figure to Tyler, then continued his conversation.
I'm just thinking I heard a joke about a fellow like yourself with a name similar. Would you like to hear it?
I like jokes. I just hope it is not too dirty or vulgar. If my girlfriend heard it, I'd be done for, sure.
Tyler is now thinking back to Caitlin and where she could be. He hadn't really cared before.
It's not bad. Besides, we'll never tell, and neither will you, right?
Tyler catches a little smile from within the shadows. But that can't be right. A bluish flame, ever brief, illuminates Anton's smile in the darkness. Tyler, uneased by the effect, tries to dismiss it. In denial at the torch blue effect revealing Anton's razor-like teeth, Tyler scoffs.
Oh, that bluish glow must be the cell phone he has. Boy, does it sure look like mine, though. He's got good taste in phones. Okay, I'm all ears.
Which wasn't a lie. Tyler's ears had a distinct size to them. It's a wonder he hadn't heard Anton when the pirate snatched Tyler's phone. Anton begins his jest.
Well, let's begin our lurid tale. A man goes to see a lady of ill repute.
What's that? Is she like a secretary, except now they are called administrative assistants to be politically correct? I don't know why either. They should just be a secretary, which reminds me that I need to get my resume done.
You mean resume?
Anton is getting more annoyed.
No, it's a resume. I need it to get a job at Starbucks. They say I can't put the offshore stuff because it doesn't pertain to the coffee server job. I was supposed to get the resume done 2 months ago, but I had to find Electabuzz back then. And now it's Baltrexanasals.
Tyler rambles and rambles and rambles. He won't have to worry about the resume much longer. Or in his case, the resume.
Tyler!
Anton raises his voice to focus the food. He's wondering if this kid will give him indigestion. Tyler stops talking briefly and with a slight stoned stare says, "Yeah, what is it?"
Do you want to hear the joke?
The shadow is lighter and Tyler catches a brief look of the bearded pirate. He's got a really cool phone app to light his face like that.
Yes.
Where did you get the cool phone app to get your cell to do that? He's real curious and once again distracted.
Tyler, joke, it's not an app. Anton had to cool the rage, or he'd waste an easy meal ripping Tyler to pieces.
Okay, joke it is. Must be the strange lights in the fog. I heard people walking in fog can cause static
Tyler is interrupted. A man goes meet a prostitute. You know what that is, right? Say not a word, just nod.
Tyler nods in agreement and Anton raises his hand to warn him quiet.
Anyway, he is there to use her services. They come to an accord.
He sees the boy confused.
An agreement for sex, Tyler.
Anton continues the joke, preparing to pounce and tear the boy from ear to ear if he interrupts again.
Anyway, he takes his shoes off and she sees he has twisted toes. The lady asks, "What happened to your toes?" The man replies, "I have a medical condition. It's called toe-leo, like polio, but it's benign and not contagious. It really won't bother our agreement." She agrees, and they continue. He pulls off his trousers. The prostitute notices his shins are red and swollen. "What happened to your lower legs?" The man, not missing a beat. "Oh, I got this medical condition from working on my feet called shin splints. It's benign and not contagious. It should not in any way affect our agreement." She nods and agrees. Then she notices purple spots on both of the man's knees. "Oh my goodness, what's on your knees?" The man proceeds to explain. "Well, people get the measles. In my case, I got a benign case that only affects the knees. It's called measles. It should not affect our agreement." The lady nods and agrees. Tyler can see more details of the pirate jokester as the mist drifts away, revealing more of him. Dread had diminished earlier, trying to follow Anton's joke. Now the unease had returned slightly. Tyler was desperately trying not to speak during Anton's tale. He was getting a strange vibe, an intuitive feeling that he was starting to irritate and anger the weird pirate. A light bulb was starting to flicker in Tyler Pochet's brain of the danger he was in. Reality scurried up like a horde of rats, reminding him that he was listening to a bad joke in a graveyard, and who he was conversing with. A total pirate nutcase. Tyler had become aware that angering this strange man in a cemetery may not be a good idea. The man drops his undergarment to his privates. The lady lets out an exclamation. "Oh no, I see you have another medical condition, and this one may affect our agreement." The man, surprised, says, "What are you talking about? A medical condition affecting our agreement?" And the woman, with a sly smile at his privates and a visual demonstration with her index and thumb of approximately an inch, says, "It's benign and not contagious. I see you have a bad case of the smallpox too." It takes Pokemon Go legend Tyler Pochet, boyfriend to Caitlin Dupre, and certain prey for the vampire Anton Valtaire, a minute
to get the punchline. Oh, ha 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 ha! He has small junk in his trunk. Ha! Funny one. What's your name again? I don't think I told you mine when we first introduced ourselves.
Anton Valtaire. And yours?
But Anton already knew. Anton, I'm Tyler Poche from down the bayou. And he said it with a grin in those beady eyes.
I know Chauvin well, Tyler,
Anton says nonchalantly. Yes, Chauvin is quiet, and I like to ride around the bayou with my girlfriend driving. Wait, I didn't say I was from Chauvin. How do you know that? Do you know me or something? Tyler, who usually missed the obvious, caught that detail from the pirate. But he was still oblivious to the current danger he now faced with Anton Valtaire. Why hadn't he caught many other glaring red details earlier in the evening? Demoniacal clues, such as following the lead of a devilish dead blues man to go into a haunted cemetery. And more importantly, why hadn't he listened to Caitlin when she pointed out several things wrong with Robert Johnson? Those pointed teeth, the sparks from the guitar, and that wicked guitar playing. The latter was truly one of life's great mysteries.
Tyler. You are in a cemetery at well past midnight. You are obsessed to win a stupid game. You put your girlfriend at grave peril, as this was a drug buy and sell area before I started to feed here.
Anton jumps down from the crypt without making a noise, landing in front of Tyler. The speed of his movement again awes the young boy. Yeah, I know it was stupid breaking that old crypt. I should probably pay for it. I'll have to get my daddy or Caitlin to help me. Did you just say before you fed here? Captain Obvious finally notes the weird man's words after a brief ramble.
Tyler. If I wasn't so hungry, I'd make you my version of a Renfield.
He grabs Tyler's arm and raises him to his face. What's a Renfield? Ow, this hurts. You are pretty strong for such a skinny dude, though. Could you put me down? Tyler has brought a sincere laugh to the vampire he hasn't had in a while.
I truly am sorry, Tyler. I wish I wasn't so hungry.
Tyler is laughing with him at first. Then he truly sees Anton Valtaire, the vampire. The Pokemon Go challenger who would never be a champ watches in stunned horror as the vampire's fangs retract for the kill. Tyler, on the verge of full realization, smells the rot of death on Anton's breath. He gasps and retches at the decay of ages from the vampire's body in his final moment. Tears are streaming from Tyler's face as Anton brings Tyler's left hand up to his fanged mouth, pleading for his life, numb to the reality of his final mortal moment. Tyler, dumbfounded, asks, dejected, "You aren't a haunted history guy, and you aren't one of those gothic strangos either." Anton Valtaire's eyes blaze in colors of ruby red and mauve. Red blast of lightning streak across the bearded vampire's face. The creature could be a furnace of volcanic flame
at this moment. Before Tyler could say anything more, the savage creature chews off Tyler's left hand as the man-child screams. Spurting crimson blood, marrow, and sinew are launched into the foggy night air. The beast laughs, then answers while chewing on Tyler's left hand. No, I'm not a... Crunching Tyler's hand in his mouth and drinking a spurt of blood from the left wrist. Gothic stranger. But I'm a fan of Pokemon Go now. Caitlin, despite her heater on full blast, was freezing and cold in the Grand Prix. Besides the chilling weather, she had been spooked by every type of conceivable noise in the night. Caitlin could absolutely swear she heard a woman scream. Or was it? It couldn't have been Tyler. Probably it was just a rat killed by that cat she saw earlier. The cat looked kind of like her cat Poofy. Oh, how she wished she was home in bed with Poofy now. A safe, warm bed would be a far better place than ghetto cemeteries and Pokemon Go crazed boyfriends. By the street light at the north corner of the St. Louis Cemetery, number 3, she saw the ghostly thick fog twist and swirl, then churn and break. From the mist emerged into the yellow, intermittent streetlights, the largest bat Caitlin Dupre had ever seen. It moved with ageless purpose, flapping effortlessly, then slowly it glided down the street toward her. How to describe such a hellish creation? For starters, the monstrous bat's body was something out of a horrific nightmare. It was more carnivorous reptile than mammal. It had imposing pterodactyl-like leather wings. The tufts of sparse fur covering the animal spanned across a powerful, muscular body with all indications of a demonic bat. The very fur and skin seemed charged with a reddish glow that encapsulated obsidian skin, fur, and claws. But those ghastly eyes were the one thing Caitlin Dupre would never forget. Eyes of a demonic bat that at times were fluorescent mauve, then moved toward electrical streaking arcs across the obsidian pupils to complete the hellish image. The demon bat had a head amalgamated between a serpent and a vampire bat. "Oh my God," is all Caitlin could say, realizing possibly the worst for Tyler Poche. With tears running down her face and terror in her heart, Caitlin hid. The powerful beast and its 6-foot wingspan drifted down the street toward her car. "Tyler!" Click, crack. Something, possibly plastic or glass, dropped onto her roof. The object appeared to bounce onto the hood of her car, then onto the street. At the same time, Caitlin heard gusts from leathery bat wings flap over her car. Her car twisted and shook from the powerful bat's ascent into the night. Caitlin was in a hysterical panic when she rushed to start her car. Clicking on her headlights, she went to drive off like literally a bat out of hell. Putting her seatbelt on, she placed her car in drive to leave. She knew it had been just a few minutes since she saw that horrific bat,
but it had felt as if it had been an eternity. A horrific and terrifying eternity for Caitlin, watching and waiting to make sure that evil thing had flown off on the night winds. At any rate, it was time to leave, with or without Tyler Poche. With growing dread, Caitlin remembered the object dropped by the bat on her car. The same plastic and glass object she heard hit her roof, then bounce from her car onto the asphalt street. She had to know what the hideous beast had dropped. Why did she have to know? She could not say. It was a certain clairvoyance of where Tyler was, or what could be done to find him. He was her boyfriend, for God's sake, and she just couldn't abandon him out of fear. Caitlin put her car in park. She said out loud to the swirling fog surrounding her car, "I have to know. Where are you, Tyler?" Caitlin Dupre's obsessive curiosity overcame her current terror. Reluctantly and very cautiously, she opened the door and got out to find the item. Outside her vehicle and racing against her own hysteria, Caitlin found the dropped object by the bat. With the object in hand, she quickly ran back inside the safety of her car. Without hesitation, Caitlin locked the door. What did Caitlin find out on that cold, lonely street? What was the item the demon bat carelessly dropped at her very feet? The bat left Caitlin the cell phone of Tyler Poche. Tyler's phone was covered in a foamy red slime with clots of blood. Crying uncontrollably, she realized that this is not a good sign. Tai was in a lot of trouble, if he was even alive at all. Wiping off the phone, she saw the phone was still working. Trying to not think of what happened to Tyler, Caitlin contemplated her next move. She must report Tyler missing to the authorities for sure. But what to tell them? How would she explain Tyler Poche climbing into a New Orleans cemetery in the middle of the night? Should she call Mama and Dad to explain this crazy story to them? Will they want to lock her up after she tells them the truth? Caitlin said out loud, "I would lock me up in a padded cell if I reported bloody phones delivered by bats. I'd lock myself up for sure earlier today if I told myself I saw a horde of rats and roaches in a congregation headed into a cemetery." There was a buzz from Tyler's phone. Smiling sadly, Caitlin saw a curious event on the phone. Tyler Poche had won the Pokemon Go game without her. Despite every horrifying and evil thing he must have went through, Tyler had found his coveted Baltrexel. The creature illuminated his screen, saying he had secured the 5 levels. It was a bittersweet moment for Caitlin. She put the phone down on the seat next to her, crying again uncontrollably. She knew something really awful had happened to Tyler. He would never give up his phone and Pokemon Go chances to anything, even a giant bat, without a fight. Imagining him fighting that monstrous bat made her cry some more, but smile briefly. Caitlin was about to scream and bawl in rage over the loss of her beloved Tyler when a buzz came over her own phone. Shocked, by her phone going off in the middle of the night. Caitlin picked it up to look. There was a notification of a new text. It was a notification on her phone from an unidentified number. Now, who would be texting her at this hour? What did the strange text say to Caitlin Dupre? Was the text even for Caitlin? She thought to herself, I need to know. The text was brief, but to the point.
Caitlin Dupre, I bid you a fine good evening. You were lucky tonight, Caitlin. But I'm afraid, dear, your Tyler was not. I must say, Tyler was rather annoying, but he definitely had the chops for humor. Though I had my reservations of dining with him, I must say Tyler did lighten my rather somber mood. Trust that I do believe in closure for lost lovers. And sadly, I must confirm he has been dispatched dead. I promise to send the his remains to you or his next of kin. It may take me a moment to get him together for proper interment. Now, my warning to you. Come here again at night, and your luck and my generosity will have run aground. Be warned. By the way, I truly must thank you both for this game. Yes, I do think I'm going to enjoy playing Pokemon Go. I've already gotten a taste for it. Sincerely, Anton Valtaire. Thank you for listening. Have a great night. Oh, and happy birthday, Johnny Depp.